This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Now that the dust has settled from election night, many are now looking forward to the future and what it means for each of the parties. A lot of focus has been paid, not least by us, to the Conservatives, with discussion about how the imminent leadership election could play out. Similarly, a lot of attention has been paid to Reform UK, the new right-wing insurgent party led by Nigel Farage that has now established a bridgehead for itself to begin attacking the Tories from. However, little attention has or is being paid to the Liberal Democrats, who until last week have struggled to escape the shadow of the coalition years. In a remarkable turnaround, they have now secured their highest seat share in their history, with them pretty much quadrupling their MPs since 2019. So it's worth asking, with the Lib Dems back as the third largest party in the House of Commons, what now? Is this the start of the Lib Dem resurgence, and what can we expect from them over the next 5 years? Let's have a look. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. It's worth starting by reflecting briefly on the scale of the Lib Dem victory last week. Back in 2005, the Liberal Democrats, led by Charles Kennedy, won 62 seats, something that was, at the time, seen as the start of a Liberal Democrat resurgence and a show of support from left-wing voters. Despite a brief wobble under Menzies Campbell, in which the party believed that support from the left was being lost, the Lib Dems managed to hold on to the support they gained in 2005, and not only remain the third largest party in the Commons, but also become the kingmakers. Although they were reduced down to 57 seats, it was their decision as to who formed the next government, with both the Tories and Labour failing to secure themselves a majority. After discussions with both parties, Clegg formed a coalition government with David Cameron, something that allowed him to actually press ahead with enacting Liberal Democrat policies, such as a referendum on voter reform, the new Fixed-Term Parliament Act, and a new proposal to introduce elected health boards. The point we're making is that in both the 2005 and 2010 elections, they actually achieved fewer seats than they did last week. Both of these elections were historic for the Lib Dems, with the former being the start of their mini-resurgence and the latter being the year they became the kingmakers. If they're able to hold on until the next election, there's every chance that this could be seen as the beginning of another Lib Dem resurgence, and if a hung parliament were to happen once again, they could find themselves in a similar position. Anyway, this is all hypothetical, and with the next election not expected until 2029, we should try not to get too ahead of ourselves. Instead, let's move on and have a look at what the Lib Dems are now able to do as the third largest party in Parliament. The first thing to note with this is the increase the Lib Dems will see in their funding. The UK has a system whereby opposition parties receive funding in order to carry out their parliamentary activities. This is known as short money, named after Edward Short, the then leader of the House of Commons who introduced the system in 1974. For every seat an opposition party wins, they're given £22,285.86, and for every 200 votes they receive, they're awarded an extra £44.53. What this means is that more electorally successful parties get more funding, and can therefore make more of their time in the House of Commons. Unfortunately for the Tories, their poor performance in the election means that they'll get less money than Labour did when they were in opposition. Prior to being elected to government, Labour received about £7.7 million in short money funding. The Tories, however, will receive just over £4 million. The Lib Dems, though, will see their money increase significantly. Prior to the election, they received just under £1 million, and thanks to the huge increase in both their number of MPs and number of votes, this will increase to just over £2 million. Money, though, isn't the only thing that the Lib Dems will see more of. By default, the third largest party in the House of Commons gets to ask the Prime Minister 2 questions at PMQs each week. Prior to the 2024 general election, the third largest party was the SNP. For 5 years, the Westminster leader of the SNP was allocated these questions. Now, though, it'll be Ed Davey's turn. Similarly, as a result of their increased seat share, the Lib Dems will comprise more of the select committees in the House of Commons. The membership of these committees are allocated proportionally by the size of parties in the Commons as a whole. As the Lib Dems have just over 10% of the seat share in the Commons, each select committee will be made up of around 10% Lib Dem MPs. This gives them significantly more power when it comes to legislating and holding the Labour government to account. What's even more significant is that the chairmanship of the committees are also divided among parties, meaning that the Lib Dems won't just be on committees, they'll be chairing some too. As we mentioned earlier, the SNP were the third largest party prior to the election. As such, they were given the chairmanship of 2 committees. The Lib Dems will now get a similar number, although we don't yet know exactly which. All of these new roles and responsibilities in the House will give them significantly more attention from the media, something that opposition parties, especially smaller opposition parties, desperately need and often struggle with. And to be fair, now that Ed Davey can't use the exciting photo ops and activities that he used in the campaign period to garner attention from the media, all of this will be useful to maintain the party's relevance over the next 5 years. If utilised well, it could help the Lib Dems use the 2024 election as a springboard for further political power, and ensure that, if a hung parliament happens again in the near future, they're well placed to once again act as the kingmakers.
Running a profitable online news brand that gives away free content is a little tricky. So recently we launched an online store where you can purchase copies of our magazine, Too Long. The thing is, setting up an e-commerce business is also pretty tricky. But fortunately, when it comes to websites and e-commerce, Skillshare is there to help, with me taking their very useful course, Shopify Essentials for Web Developers, when setting up the store. That's because Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. That means that Skillshare can help take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustles to the next level. There's hundreds of career-focused classes. That's courses from how to start a business to maximizing your workflow or digital marketing. The best news is that the first 500 people to use our link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare. So get started today.